Welcome to Indiana Sports Beat Radio, presented by Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington and Southern Stone Restaurant.
Looks over the middle, second guesses, fires, throws. Does he make the catch in the end zone? Yes! Touchdown! Oladipo to win it.
Another one!
He got
Another
it!
one! Another one!
Huge hole. He's at the 30. He's going to go. 10, 5, touchdown. Jonathan Taylor.
Worked out by Burke. Bounces into Cody. Puts it up. Scores!
Now, from the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios, here's your host, Jim Coyle.
Hello, everybody. Happy Friday. Hope you're having a good one. I think I'm going to. Dylan Sinn will be joining us. Lots to talk about. More info about the college football signing day as that continues to progress. Indiana takes on Notre Dame tomorrow. Lots of other things going on this weekend. Plenty of sports to talk about. NFL last night. Overtime game. Some excitement there. We'll hear from Woody. We'll hear from Tom Allen. Plenty to get along to today, and we'll hear from you, of course. Hope everything is going well with everyone. Let's see, not a lot going on last night. We're waiting for Dylan to jump back on here with us.
I've got a little fun fact for you, Jim, that I want to share.
Yes, sir.
So obviously, a few years ago, Kentucky basketball was undefeated going into the Final Four. They lost to Wisconsin. They were 38-1 on the end of the season. Last night, U of L volleyball was undefeated in the Final Four. And guess who they lost to? The University of Wisconsin. The unbeaten Slayers, the Badgers are. Just thought I'd share that little fun fact with you this morning.
Well, there you go. So, I didn't know they were in the Final Four already for that. But there you go to that. Last night in college basketball, one game in the top 25. No, that's tonight, rather. Villanova visits Creighton. Guess I'm a day ahead of myself. Last night, Duke was the only top 25 game, Dylan, as they took care of App State. But plenty of other games going on. Right now, it's the not ranked teams. It's the not Power 5 teams that are getting on TV because it's finals week. So all of these games with Rice and Coastal Carolina and St. Andrews Presbyterian, App State, Stetson, South Carolina State, all these teams that's who's playing right now. Why? I don't really know. Maybe it's because they can get some TV time.
Yeah, I think that's most of it. There's so many teams that are off right now. And so this is an opportunity for those teams to get on TV. I mean, not everyone is on the same finals schedule. So I'm sure there are some that took their finals last week or have them, I don't know, after Christmas maybe. So they have these teams have opportunities. They're going to get on TV as often as they can.
Yeah, it's same with this week. Tonight, again, just a slate of games along those lines. So an opportunity to watch some teams that some of which you will see at the end of the season in the NCAA tournament. So you'll always see, you're like, hey, who's that team? Well, there you go. You can find out about them that way. A lot of problems with COVID right now, Dylan. We're seeing in sports. UCLA canceled a game with Alabama State because of that. We saw now Ohio State and Kentucky canceled. Lots of problems in the pro sports. More problems on the pro side, and I think that's because maybe they're not taking as many precautions. But it might
also be that they're testing on a more regular basis. That's bringing up cases that probably they wouldn't be obvious if they weren't testing. So I think that's part of it. I don't know how much college teams are testing anymore. I'm sure it's on a semi-regular basis, but the pros have a little bit more. They have more money available, so they can do it on a more regular basis. I think that's partially the case.
One quick note of irony I noticed in that game that Kentucky was canceled. Rick Pitino, not one to miss an opportunity, quickly to tweet out, if Kentucky needs a game Saturday at UKM men's basketball, we'll travel. He's talking about his Iona Gales. He offered to play Kentucky. I found that very funny. And I guarantee you they wouldn't take him up because they would probably lose to that Iona team right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's one of those Kentucky teams that, as usual, is pretty rough early in the season. John Calipari kind of changed their scheduling a little bit this year, where they played Duke at the beginning of the season. They played a whole bunch of nobodies until they played Notre Dame in the hopes of being able to gel in some of those weaker games. And it's obvious that they're just not good right now because Notre Dame is not particularly good. And Notre Dame was the tougher, more physical team that entire game. And so, yeah, that's a Kentucky team that's still finding itself. And at this point in Calipari's tenure, it's year to year whether the team finds itself at all. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. And so, yeah, I don't think that – I think you're right that Iona would win that game. And so, yeah, they're probably not going to take them up on that offer.
Yesterday, we began the college football signing day, of course, signing period. Indiana and the entire Big Ten East, first of all, owned, as usual. It's almost it's getting to the pathetic point when you looked at the Big Ten recruiting rankings. Iowa was the only team not to be a Big Ten East team, I believe, that finished in the top 7. Unless that's changed, and that's very possible because it's kind of a fluid thing. But how about that? That just screams change. I talked about this yesterday with Dustin Schutte. The Big Ten East has won every Big Ten championship. It's year in, year out this way, and the Big Ten Conference is just like, what are you talking about? It's like they don't know what they're talking about. I mean, that can't be good. I would think it would be better for the Big Ten to have a little bit better balance. Now, the SEC has a little bit of this issue as well, but it doesn't seem like it's as prevalent with the Big Ten.
Yeah, so that's the question, right? Are the teams in the East getting better recruiting classes because they're better teams, or are they getting better recruiting classes because they're in the East? Like, what's the cause and effect there? Because there's no particular reason that Rutgers should have a better recruiting class than Wisconsin, but they did this season, and it's weird, and you wonder what the cause and effect is there. Like, if they move the teams around, would you inevitably have the teams that are in the same division as Penn State, Ohio State, and Michigan just get the better classes? And so I guess the question is, they should probably go to some kind of pod system where they have a couple of protected rivalries, and then you play different teams every year to rotate. That doesn't seem like something that's on the table right now. They genuinely seem to like the current alignment for some reason. And I don't know why, but the way they did it this year, it did create a lot of fun games toward the end where you had Ohio State, Michigan State, Penn State, and Michigan all playing each other late in the season. That created a lot of fun matchups at the end of the season, but it did kind of create a lot of really bad Big Ten West matchups between teams that had no chance of doing anything all year. I don't know how well and Illinois, Nebraska was early in the season, but like Illinois, Minnesota or something like that. I don't know how much that grabs viewers. So yeah, I would expect change to come at some point, but it doesn't seem like they're too bent on it. They seem like they like what they have right now.
Yeah, that's been the issue. That's they're sitting on their hands. Not only are they refusing to do anything, they don't even acknowledge that it's an issue. That's the problem. They don't even acknowledge it. They act like it's not there. Oh well, the West, the teams in the West are just as competitive in the East. Blah blah blah. No, they're not. That's simply a lie. No, they're not. The East wins every championship. The East has better recruiting classes, even at their bottom level teams. So I don't know how can the Big Ten Conference stand there and continue to just lie out of their face like that?
Yeah, it's weird because Wisconsin was the best team in the East for most of this season. We saw them get pretty well demolished by Michigan. We saw them not really be competitive early in the season, and then they ran through the East very, very easily until they got to the end of the season where they got tripped up against Minnesota. But Iowa won the West. It was pretty clear that they were doing with smoke and mirrors almost the entire season, and they got in the Big Ten championship game and weren't even competitive in the slightest. Now, I do think Wisconsin would have given Michigan a better game in the championship game, but yeah, having Iowa there in your showcase game, this Iowa team, which had basically relied, the only games they're going to win are games where the other team makes a ton of mistakes, is kind of embarrassing for the league. Iowa was not a good team this year, and the fact that they were able to come out of the West is pretty remarkable. And so, yeah, it's just not what you want in your showcase game.
You had an Iowa. I remember when Iowa was playing Nebraska, who was one of the worst teams in their conference, in their league, in their division. Iowa was 9-2 and about to become the West champion, and they were a 1.5 point favorite. Now, that sounds good if you've got parity, but that wasn't parity because Nebraska wasn't good. Iowa wasn't good. They just stink as a division. Yeah, Wisconsin's kind of good every now and then, and Iowa's kind of good every now and then, but neither of them are elite. And now you've got elite teams over in the Big Ten East that just kind of rotate. Ohio State stays elite. Michigan now has risen up. Penn State in and out of that. Michigan State trying to rotate back into that. You've got Indiana with a top 20 class for the first time in program history that we haven't even talked about yet. So it's not getting any better for that East-West debate. It looks, as a matter of fact, it looks like it's about to get much worse.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing is the classes, that's what I was talking about with the cause and effect, right? Because eventually, the class it's going to it is going to widen the gap over time because it does seem like Indiana and Rutgers are improving in terms of recruiting, especially with Rutgers under Schiano. Maryland has done fairly well. They've done every year under Mike Lasley. They've gotten some really high profile recruits that probably are way too good to go to Maryland, but they've done a really good job. And so, yeah, as you said, Iowa coming off this 10-3 season they've had is the only Big Ten West team in the top 7. And yeah, so you wonder how long that's going to last because it does seem like the gap would start to get wider. Wisconsin is one of the more underachieving teams in recruiting. They should not be the 10th ranked team in the Big Ten in recruiting. That just shouldn't be happening with all the success they've had over the last 20 years here. And yet they're just not recruiting at the level that you would expect. Maybe that's Paul Chryst, maybe that's Wisconsin being in a division that doesn't really have any marquee matchups, right? So you have to wonder what is the cause and effect there? I think that's something the Big Ten has to figure out pretty quick here.
Yeah, but the thing is, like I said, is they just seem intent on ignoring that it's a problem, that it doesn't really exist. I love when they do that. I love when they act like that people are just stupid and problems aren't there. But it is what it is. What impetus do they have to change?
I think the impetus to change is that there were so many Big Ten West games this year that were just like really, really ugly. The main problem is that a lot of the Big Ten West teams, especially, play styles of football that are just not fun to watch. And so when you have them playing against each other, it's really ugly football. Northwestern, Iowa, Wisconsin to a certain extent, depending on whether they're running the ball effectively. Illinois is another team that kind of waits for the other team to make a mistake and runs the ball and can't really throw it very well. and maybe that'll change as Brett Bielema gets further into his tenure. But those are teams that don't play a particularly pretty brand of football. Ohio State, Michigan State, even Rutgers and Indiana, when they're rolling to a certain extent, play a fairly enjoyable to watch brand of football. Michigan doesn't, quite frankly, but it's an enjoyable brand of football to watch. In the East, you have more of those matchups, where in the West, it's a lot of these teams that are playing this kind of slow, wait for the other team to make a mistake, grind you out on the ground football. And though it's fun when those type of teams go against each other, like an East team versus a West team, but there's not nearly as many of those games. And then there are so many games in the West where you have in Illinois versus Northwestern, and no one can throw the ball at all through the air, and it just gets ugly, and no one wants to watch. And so I wonder if that's something that they're going to have to change going forward.
We got to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk more about this later, because Nebraska, they came in last. Not looking good for Scott Frost. Alec Lasley is going to join us next. We're going to talk about some Indiana basketball as the Hoosiers are set to take on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish in the last installment of the Crossroads Classic tomorrow afternoon at Gamebridge Fieldhouse. We're back with more right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington and Southern Stone Restaurant.
Whether it's a celebration.
Good morning, Alec.
Morning. How's it going, guys?
Fine.
It's going. By the way, Alec and Dylan, too, we're not having a live show next Friday with it being Christmas Eve.
Okay.
Just to let you know ahead of time.
Got it.
Thank you.
Should have known this was coming as soon as I said something like that.
Well, you shouldn't say no show.
I said no live show. I was specific. There will be a radio pre-recorded show.
Or we can do one.
You realize that commenter's probably kidding.
You realize I'm probably kidding.
Oh, normally you're not.
Normally you're right.
See, here we go.
Love y'all.
Oh, Jim. Leah didn't get a photographer credential. They didn't have enough space. So she has a credential. She can go. Everyone else got approved. She can go, but she just.
Are you talking about tomorrow?
Yeah, but the Fieldhouse guy told me that their in-house photographer would send me anything that we needed.
15. You all ready?
I'll shoot that email over to you after this.
That's part of that whole deal that I've been talking about. Relegated down.
If we're not on the station where you live, we should be. Ask for Indiana Sports Beat Radio.
This segment is brought to you by Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington. Now back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington and Southern Stone Restaurant.
Welcome back, Indiana Sports Beat Radio here on Friday. TGIF. Alec Lasley from thehoosier.com joining us now. Alec, how are you?
Good, guys. How you doing?
Cannot complain. Dylan's with us as well. Lots going on as the Crossroad Classics last installment this week. Indiana taking on Notre Dame. Dylan covers them. Purdue taking on Butler. He covers Purdue as well. So not a lot of tears being shed, to be honest with you, that this is over, because it's not like it's this big event. I'm more excited to think about Indiana playing Kansas next year already than I think fans are more excited about that. And that's what the opportunity of not having to play this thing does. So there's a win right out of the gate.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think over the past probably, especially 2 or 3 years, everyone was pretty down on the Crossroads Classic, just because you look at Notre Dame and Butler both being down, not having very consistent, successful years year after year. And obviously with Indiana and Purdue never playing each other in that event, it was back and forth between kind of a lose-lose situation, or basically a no-win situation for a team like Indiana, who was always going to be right on the bubble. That wasn't going to be a signature win for them no matter who they played, and it was going to be a bad loss for them, no matter who they played. So it didn't help them out in any capacity. It was great for the fans, but I think everyone, it kind of took its course, like I said, over the past few seasons. And now you look obviously for, a Kansas matchup. And we heard Mike Woodson talk about wanting to get up something with UCLA or get something going again with Kentucky in his media availability yesterday. So he's looking for the big games. I think the fact that he's been able to put together a couple big events already just shows you that, he's very, very serious about this. He's willing to kind of go wherever they want to go to get these big time matchups. And he's gonna make sure that Indiana is in some of these big time events, because one, that's the only way that you're going to continue that fan excitement year after year, travel around the country, but also put your team back on that kind of national presence that Indiana really hasn't had over the past 10 years. And that's the only way to do it, is play in these big time events, play these home and home series with a consistent top 5 program in Kansas. And so I think everyone's pretty excited about the Crossroads Classic ending, and then starting up a new venture with Kansas and whatever else is going to come here over the next few seasons.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. Woodson also talked about, even though the Crossroads Classic is ending, he wants to play games in Indianapolis going forward. I think he's right to want to do that, because Indianapolis, Mike Bray talked yesterday, the Notre Dame coach talked yesterday about how every time they play Indiana in this Crossroads Classic, it's essentially a home game for Indiana, because IU fans take over the arena. And so I think that it's a way for Indiana fans who don't live in Southern Indiana to go to an Indiana game, get to a game when they play in Indianapolis. And so that's something that they should really consider, is continuing to play games there, try to schedule some games there, because that's been huge for IU over the last 10 years, and just getting another opportunity for fans to come see them that isn't all the way down to Bloomington.
Yeah, and I think he mentioned Kentucky, the magic words, the series that every Indiana fan wants to see back. And I think college basketball wants to see back, because it's one of those games that should happen. It's like Duke and North Carolina not playing. It's stupid. It's just dumb. But that's because you've got somebody whining over that. I don't know if that series comes back while Calipari's at Kentucky or not. But things aren't looking great for him down there right now. Anyway, they're losing again, and they don't have a very good team. Don't know what this year's going to be like, but it's not like he's going to get run out of Kentucky. But he's been there a long time. It's got to be getting close for the end of the run for him. So it still probably may be a few years off for that, but it doesn't matter whether it's Kentucky or someone else. Kansas, it's going to be, you're going to see those high profile games. Indiana needs those high profile games. I mean, Calipari is getting lambasted for the weak schedule they're playing. Indiana's schedule is not a whole lot better, to be honest with you. And it kind of shows if you're not getting pushed around, if you're not getting challenged, and that you end up losing to a team like Syracuse, who's not worth a snot. Wisconsin's not been playing a lot better, so they're not being challenged enough in the early season to get ready for the Big Ten play.
Yeah, and Mike Woodson even talked about that kind of the multiple times over the past few weeks, where a lot of people have asked about the scheduling, about playing a lot of mid-majors and everything. Obviously, for him, it was a little bit more difficult to really kind of put together a schedule when he was trying to go out and recruit and kind of get a team going back in the spring. So you're seeing a lot of these new games, new opponents show up over the next few years. That's all going to be from Mike Woodson. And you see that right away from Kansas, like we just talked about. But he's going to bring in, whether it's a home and home, whether they travel somewhere, whether it's a neutral site game, like Dylan was saying in Indy. I think you're just going to see a lot more of the more difficult schedules coming out here for Indiana over the next couple of seasons that you see with a Gonzaga, you see a North Carolina traveling, even if it's to, a smaller in-state school and playing on the road, because a lot of these teams that do that end up being a lot more successful in their conference and down the line in the NCAA tournament, because they've been battle tested a lot earlier on. And regardless of if you have a young team or an older team, this team still has never showed that they can really truly win on the road. And Mike Woodson's talked about that over and over again. Until you've done it, you haven't done it. And it's easy to say that, and it's easy to say, go to a lower maybe Big Ten opponent or mid-major or anything and win on the road. Mm-hmm. But if you haven't done it, you don't know what it's actually like. And Indiana needs a lot more of those games on their schedule, even if they do have a veteran roster, just because they haven't been playing together a whole lot. They're still trying to figure each other out. So for this year, I think the schedule is going to be better just because they haven't had that chemistry. And you're starting to see finally, at least at different spurts offensively, they're starting to get it together. So I think this year it was much better that they didn't go out on the road 3 or 4 times in the non-conference, because it's a very difficult thing to do for even a battle-tested squad. One that's been together for 3-4 seasons. So for Indiana to really kind of figure out who they are, this schedule was definitely put in place to kind of help them out with that. So we're obviously going to see exactly who they are pretty early on in Big Ten play, and especially when they go on the road starting in Big Ten play, to see what we should really expect from them going down the stretch this year.
I do wonder whether we're going to go toward a model where unfortunately teams schedule fewer big games early in the season, just because more and more teams are going to be built through the transfer portal and are not going to have been together for a long time. There are obviously always going to be some teams that are veteran laden. Purdue seems to be one that really wants to build through its own program. Michigan State seems to want to do the same thing, although they've brought in transfers as well. But I do wonder if we're going to see fewer high-profile games, because teams are building on a more year-to-year basis. And not saying whether that's good or bad, but it is going to take down the competition of the non-conference season just a little bit, because you don't want to schedule a bunch of really difficult games right at the beginning of your season if your players haven't played together for a long time. And I think Alec, you made a good point, which is that this year's schedule with Indiana bringing in so many new players probably set up fairly well to kind of ease them into things a little bit. And you would have loved to have gotten one of those wins at Wisconsin or at Syracuse, but you're still 8-2 and you still have all your goals in front of you. Whereas if you played a bunch of difficult games and you are 5-5 right now, and you just kind of feel like, well, where is this season going? Things could have spiraled fairly quickly.
TV controls a lot of that, unfortunately, and there will still continue to be a lot of games in the early season. Like, the Dukes, they're always going to be playing in those classics, in those basically made for TV events is all they are, because otherwise there would not be any good basketball in December. It would all suck. It would be everybody playing the cupcakes like it used to be back in the day. So, and having like ACC, Big Ten Challenge, SEC, all that stuff going across, that helps somewhat as well. So, but you make a good point. They're certainly going to want to do that.
Yeah, one thing, because you brought it up, the Big Ten ACC Challenge, that I feel like that's lost a lot of its kind of major push over the last few seasons. I don't know if you guys feel the same, but we're just starting to get one or two good matchups, and the rest of these matchups seem to be pretty lax and no one that really cares about them. I mean, if you look at the Purdue matchup this year, right? Purdue, Florida State, it's probably the one year that Florida State is a little bit down and Purdue wipes the floor with them instead of, a Purdue and a Duke are going to be probably two of the top 5 teams, two of the top 10 teams, let's say, in the country throughout the whole season. They know these things. They know Ohio State's probably going to be a little bit more down this year, and they were obviously to start. Even a North Carolina, obviously, they played Purdue earlier too, but I just feel like a lot of these matchups just are more so, and kind of goes back to Dylan's point, where a lot of these coaches and a lot of these teams don't want to play these high profile games early in the season because they just don't want to lose these games early on. Obviously you get those teams that do, but I just feel like a lot of the scheduling needs to kind of go over and kind of get redone here. I'd love to see the Big Ten ACC Challenge kind of go away and maybe you do something with the Big 12 or the SEC. The SEC is starting to be a major power in college basketball. And I think that the style of play, I think that a lot of people would really love to see the contrasting styles between the SEC and Big Ten, just to test people out. Purdue's always struggled with that, right? And that's why they seem to lose earlier on more often than not in the NCAA tournament because of those quicker guards and the quicker styles of play. So I would just love to see something different happen with some of the scheduling because it just gets old year after year when a lot of the same teams are playing a lot of the same schedules and you only get maybe the 4 to 6 top teams in the country that actually want to go out and play someone. And you get a Duke who never travels on the road and never schedules a true road game until they actually get an ACC play. And obviously they don't set their own schedules in ACC play. So not to go on a tangent here on the scheduling, but it really needs to be fixed in college basketball because like you said, outside of maybe some of these TV games early in December, no one really gives a crap about any of these games because they're just not very good.
To your point, Purdue played Florida State this year. This is the second time in 3 years. Second time in 4 years they played them in the Big Ten ACC Challenge, and the third time in 4 years they played them in the non-conference schedule. This is like they played in the Emerald Coast Classic 2 years ago as well. So you're playing the same teams. Indiana played Florida State in back-to-back Big Ten ACC challenges. Like the Big Ten and the ACC, they seem kind of allergic to scheduling really high-profile games. You're not getting a Purdue versus a Duke. Right, like they're not doing that. Duke is playing Ohio State, and that's fine.
Well, they were doing that to Indiana. It seemed a couple of years ago because Indiana was getting stuck with it was North Carolina or Duke, and unfortunately for Indiana, they were not on par at that time from a program standpoint. But the TV wanted Indiana, North Carolina, Indiana, Duke because those are the names that people want to see. But unfortunately, those were not good matchups.
And that was the thing. That was Duke played in Assembly Hall that one year, but that was one of the last times I remember Duke playing a high-profile non-conference game on the road. Maybe I just haven't been paying that much attention
because they don't. Yeah, they don't,
right.
And that goes back to the point where they just never schedule a true road game. And this came out a few seasons ago where if you look back, I think the last true road game that they actually scheduled, well, it was back in like the late 2000s because they don't want to go on the road. They really don't. It's something that people have started to take notice over the past few seasons.
You know why?
But even obviously we know why.
I saw a stat that John Calipari, who has been in Kentucky, 11 years, 10 years, 11 years?
This is the 13th year, actually.
13 years.
Yeah.
He's 1 in 7 in true road games. So first of all, the fact that he's only played 8 in 13 years, and he can't win on the road.
Yeah, he's not going to have too many places to go now.
Yeah, he's running out of places to not want to go back to. Well, I can't win there, and I go back. Yeah, the entire state of Indiana is about to be out for him. I guess he's got Butler and Purdue to go try to play at yet. But we got to take a break. I'm not sure, Alec, if you're sticking around or not. Are you staying for another break?
Yeah, I can if we need it.
Because I don't know. John, you're in charge, brother. We're back with more Indiana Sports Beat Radio right after this.
We'll be right back to the golf club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington and Southern Stone Restaurant.
The pro and college football.
Yeah, we don't have Zach until 9:30.
Because we didn't talk about any recruiting, really.
And I'm uploading right now some clips from Woody. I know you all talked about that kind of stuff already, but if you do...
Yeah, and it's good to have Dylan on here because Dylan covers Purdue.
Yep, absolutely.
Indiana's recruiting is going national. They're going to go away from they're going to try to get a couple of the best guys in Indiana. Other than that, Indiana's not, I don't think it's as important anymore.
It's the happy medium between Tom Crean style recruiting and Archie Miller style recruiting.
No, it's just getting the absolute best players, period.
It was interesting. Did you see? So Purdue got that. Purdue got Dre Gibbs Lawhorn yesterday. He committed to Purdue. I was reading that basically he said that he wasn't really hearing from IU much after Archie left, which I was a little bit surprised by. Maybe Mike decided that. Alec, you could speak to this maybe better than I can, but it seems like he decided they didn't need him.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the major thing with him was the foot injury, going out to a prep school in Utah, and there was just a lot of they weren't going to be able to see him a ton. Didn't play in basically like 14 to 16 months. So there were a lot of question marks. He basically only had that Purdue offer that was committable, if you really think of it. So, IU went after, major players like Jeremy Fears. Obviously, they got Gabe Cupps, they got Ja'Kai Newton. They're going after Miro Little. So, I mean, they prioritized a lot different of a style of play, more kind of physical guards where he's more, not to say he's not physical, but, he can get pushed around a lot more than some of those other guards. Maybe a guy who's not totally fit for kind of what Mike Woodson is really trying to build there. Kind of reminds me a lot of Christian Lander in terms of
I was going to say, like, he has the exact same body type and style of play, it seemed like to me.
And there's a reason why Christian Lander's not playing right now. So, that's.
And I'm tired of hearing people ask about why is he not playing. Yeah. Well, it's obvious to me why he's not playing. Damn it!
15 seconds. Here we go.
Also, 0% APR financing over.
We can talk about that too.
And $0 down. Get more to your door with AndyMooreHonda.com.
Come see us at the all-new Andy Moore Honda, now in Bloomington.
This segment is brought to you by Bubba's 33 in Clarksville. Pizza, burgers, beer.
Now back to the golf club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington and Southern Stone Restaurant.
TGIF, welcome back. Happy Friday, Indiana Sports Beat Radio. It's getting ready to set your weekend off, right? Jim Coyle here with you as always. Dylan Sinn joining me from the Fort Wayne Journal-Gazette and Alec Lasley from thehoosier.com. Lots of questions people have been asking. Why is Christian Lander not playing? Well, I'll tell you why. Coach's decision. It's called a coach's decision. He doesn't think that he's ready for the minutes at whatever particular point in the game that he's not in there. Pretty much how I take it. If he wanted him in and felt that this was a situation that he needed to be in, I'm pretty sure he'd be in there. So it's very simple to me, and I don't understand why this has become such a big question for everybody. Why you're not asking about this guy or this? There's a reason. No, he's not hurt. Why is everybody so concerned about who's playing and who's not playing? It's like, wow. Yeah, I'm like, man, I don't have questions because I can figure things out. It's pretty simple. Alec?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's been at least one question about the Lander playing time, and I think four or five straight, media availabilities that Mike Woodson's had, whether it be post game, whether it be
he's tired of it. I can tell you that.
Yeah, and he got snappy yesterday when he was asked that question about kind of where does Christian Lander fit in the rotation. I mean, the thing is, right? Xavier Johnson was brought in to be the starting point guard. He's a guy who's played Power 5, high major basketball before. Guy who, yes, is going to be inconsistent. I think if anyone expected him to do a complete 180 when he came to IU and not turn the ball over and not have these certain segments where he looks pretty bad on the floor, then they were expecting something totally different, because that's just who he is. That's the style that he plays with. But you see the really good that he does bring to Indiana at times. He's not going to sit on the bench because Indiana does not have that type of point guard or that type of guard on their team outside of him. Rob Phinisee, totally different style of basketball. We've seen that over the last 4 years that he's been there, right? A much slower, methodical kind of tempo to the game, much more of a half-court style of play, and someone who really hasn't been able to push that offense into what they need to become. So then you look at Christian Lander and the potential minutes that he could get. I mean, he's going to play when he's going to play. I think at this point, you've seen him have some good minutes. You've seen him struggle in some minutes. But I think as long as he's bought into the role and he knows what to expect game in and game out, and if Mike Woodson calls his name, he needs to be ready, which he has for the most part, then that's all that really needs to be said. I don't think people need to continue to ask this over and over again, because I don't think people expect him to play 20 minutes a game. So if he's not playing 20 minutes a game, what's the difference between 7 one night and 12 the other night, or maybe get 14 or 15 like he did against Syracuse? It's just getting to the point where it's just very old and annoying almost to continue to answer these questions and ask these questions when we're 10 games in. They've played some high-profile opponents. We've seen what he can do against some of those high major teams. We've also seen what he can do against some of the mid majors, and it's not like he's blowing the roof off the building with his ability. He's going in there and doing what he needs to do, and that's all that Mike Woodson really needs from him at this very moment and at this point, and most likely moving forward. So unless there's a major injury, I don't think we're going to see him playing 15 plus minutes a game. That's just not what his role is on this team. And I think as long as he's bought into that, that's going to be okay and good for Indiana moving forward.
Yeah, I think the genesis of the questions is a lot of people, when Rob Phinisee went down with that injury earlier this year and missed a few games, a lot of people saw Christian Lander get the backup point guard minutes and thought that he looked better as the backup point guard than Rob Phinisee did. And I think that Mike Woodson disagrees with that. I think that Mike Woodson thinks that, and it's pretty clear because that's who's getting the minutes, that Rob Phinisee is the best guy to bring off the bench at point guard right now. And I think we've seen over the last few games, and maybe I'm kind of looking for something that isn't there, but it does seem like Phinisee does have a little bit more command of the offense than he did at the beginning of the season. It does seem like he does have a little more confidence. He's still not shooting it well. The scoring still isn't there in the way that we really thought it would be 3 or 4 years ago. But he is being able to distribute the ball, and he does bring so much more to the game defensively than Christian Lander does at this point. I think that's probably what Woodson is looking for. So that seems to me to be the genesis of the issue for a lot of observers, that they thought Christian Lander earned those minutes when Phinisee was down. I think Woodson just disagrees, and that's why we're going with Phinisee. They're going with Phinisee right now. And I do think that's like there's no reason to play 3 players at the same position in a game. Like no team plays 12 players in a game. Phinisee and Lander is the 10th, 11th, 12th guy on the rotation right now, and that's fine. But you need to shorten your bench at some point, and I think that's kind of where Woodson is basically saying, in a close game, he's probably not going to play that much.
It's about winning. It's about winning and having the best players on the field, on the court, on whatever at the time that you need to do it. I mean, that's just what it comes down to, no matter what sport you're talking about. And Mike Woodson is trying to get that. I mean, he would love to have a bigger rotation that he could use for instances like when everyone got into foul trouble and you were forced to do things you probably didn't want to, but because there's going to be other instances like that.
he is bringing in a larger rotation here. We've seen that now with Anthony Leal. He's that guy now. And then you bring back Trey Galloway. When he comes back, we know he's going to be on the floor because he's the type of player that Mike Woodson loves to have on both ends of the floor, kind of that hybrid.
I want somebody to tell me, what does Trey Galloway actually bring on the floor? I'm not knocking him. I'm trying to figure out, what does he actually do? He doesn't get assists. He doesn't score. He's not a lockdown defender. What's his big value? And I am not being negative. I'm trying to search and find it because I just haven't personally seen it.
I think Anthony Leal has made a better case for minutes than Galloway has, because Leal has one skill, shooting the ball, that they really
he's done well with it.
Right, and they really need, and he can bring it on a regular basis. I don't know if Galloway has that one skill, and that's what you need coming off the bench at the end of the rotation. You need one skill that you bring every single night, and I think that Leal has that right now.
Yeah, I'd say the biggest thing with Trey Galloway is he doesn't make mistakes. He may not do a ton that you're going to see in the box score, but he doesn't hurt you in any way. If you have Miller Kopp, Anthony Leal, Parker Stewart, even Xavier Johnson at times, you don't need a guy who's going to come off the bench now with that group and need to be a knockdown shooter, because you have that guy off the bench with Anthony Leal. He's proven that now this season. Trey Galloway, he has the ability to handle the ball. He has the ability to switch on multiple players on the defensive end, which if we're speaking with Christian Laettner can't do. He has the ability to rebound the ball. Christian Laettner can if it's a loose rebound that goes out more to the top of the key. He's a very physical player, and that's what you need in the Big Ten. And we were just talking during the break, a main reason why Christian Laettner isn't playing and why Mike Woodson has prioritized some of these other guards in the 2023 class is because they're more physical, they're bigger, they're longer, and they're guys that want to do all the dirty work. Christian Laettner, whether he wanted it or not, he came in as a 5-star recruit that a lot of people expected the world of. Those expectations were way misplaced. And last year really put a number not only on his confidence, but I think just what people expected from him. Now, if he goes out there and he plays 2 really, really good minutes, people think he's back. No, that's not how it works. 1, but 2, you need to do the little things on both ends of the floor consistently to earn your consistent minutes, and that's what Trey Galloway does, and that's why he's going to be on the floor, and that's why he was the 7th man, the second guy off the bench before he got injured for Mike Woodson, because he trusts what Trey Galloway can do when he's on the floor, and sometimes trust is obviously going to outweigh. Not sometimes, most of the time, trust is going to outweigh skill. When you're trying to fight for playing time.
Recruiting wise, a lot of guard in Indiana, very guard heavy. The commitments have been kind of guard heavy. They've got to go bigger, obviously, as well, because there's going to be movement with Trace Jackson Davis most likely leaving. Though they should be set after that. I'm not sure that Race Thompson's going to be going anywhere this year, but they still need to bring somebody in. And so where's Indiana recruiting wise?
Yeah, obviously the big name, Xavier Booker. Obviously he was at the Forum tip-off last week and didn't have a great game. Biggest thing with him that I think the Indiana coaching staff really needs to continue to see is that consistent level of play. He's sometimes struggled with his motor. And obviously a guy like Mike Woodson wants you to have a high motor and doesn't want to have to force you to play with, intensity. And that's kind of the biggest thing with Xavier Booker right now, is just not continually seeing that consistent play at a high level that you need to obviously impact the game right away when you come into college. For the most part, I think you're going to see Indiana get a transfer in the transfer portal, a guy who can come in, who's played significant minutes, significant games elsewhere at the Power 5 level, and become a starter right away and kind of replace Trace Jackson Davis. And what better recruiting pitch than, hey, we need to replace an All-American. We don't have an All-American coming in at that position. You're that guy. Not many teams are going to be able to have that recruiting pitch. And we've already seen what Mike Woodson can do on the recruiting trail. So I wouldn't look so much for the 2023 class to be very big man heavy. They're going to go out and get a big man, but I think you're going to see more of those forwards come from the transfer portal, just being a lot bigger, a lot more physically matured than a lot of these high school players nowadays. And unless you want to play more out on the perimeter, which, some of these forwards really want to do when they get to the next level, you're going to see Mike Woodson, especially when he wants to build this team now with a lot of his core guys, go and get that through the transfer portal and get one true big and one kind of hybrid big through the transfer portal, I would say almost every single year, instead of trying to go the recruiting route in high school and get those guys who may not make a huge impact for those first 2 seasons.
Dylan?
Yeah, I guess my thing would be the good news is that Indiana does have, when Jackson Davis leaves next year, they do have, possibly Michael Durr coming back, possibly Race Thompson coming back, and then maybe Logan Duncombe steps up, right? So they have some height next season, and then if you get into 2023, by then you hope the Logan Duncombe is ready to shoulder at least a significant portion of the load, and it kind of takes some of the urgency out of getting someone for that year, and you can maybe get someone from the high school recruiting trail, and then maybe a transfer big to come in and push Duncombe to be the guy, and maybe match up in with Duncombe at the 4 and whoever at the 5. But they have some options there. It's just a question of how quickly Duncombe develops, I feel like, and whether Durr and Thompson come back next year, because both of those guys have decisions to make.
I'll tell you, Logan Duncombe, the few minutes that I've seen him, he looks comfortable in there. He doesn't shy away from things, takes a shot. I think he's going to progress just fine, especially under someone like Mike Woodson. So I think he's going to be fine. And Race Thompson has become a beast. I don't want to put a lot on his shoulders, but he could be better than Trace Jackson Davis next year, because I think he shoots the ball better. I know that may sound crazy, but he's put up a lot of double-doubles. And he actually has a better jump shot. He has a jump shot, period. I mean, from 15 feet, he can shoot pretty comfortably, but he'll step out at the perimeter and hit a 3-pointer where Trace Jackson Davis is not going to attempt that. Alec?
I still think we're kind of, I think we're getting ahead of ourselves here when we talk about Race Thompson coming back next year. Right? He's already redshirted 1 year. I would be more surprised to see him come back. I don't see him playing in the NBA, and I don't know how much significantly more he can show. Right. We've talked about this every single offseason, the forwards. Oh my gosh, their jump shots look so much better in the summer. They're going to be able to stretch the floor. How many jump shots have we seen Trace Jackson Davis take this year? Right. It's been 2, maybe 3. He's 4, had way more, significantly way more dunks than he's ever had, I think, in his career up to this point, in 10 games into a season. So he's getting the majority of his points from the block. Race Thompson hasn't showed that he can hit the perimeter jumper at a consistent level, or even just a below average level. So, I mean, he is what he is at this point, and that's a very, very talented college player who I think goes unnoticed a lot in the national circles, because he is overshadowed by a guy like Trace Jackson Davis. And he's not the guy who Indiana needs to run offense through, but late in games, he's the guy who makes big plays that either help Indiana over the hump and get the win, or help in a comeback, or try to help fend off a comeback. So, he fits what Indiana needs. And he's one of those guys that you love to have on your team as an upperclassman. I just don't know if he's going to come back for a 6th year. That's a lot of years in college, and a lot of years playing college basketball.
Yeah, it is. But we're seeing a lot of that, though. A lot of people in school with potential 6 years. I mean, it's even in football. Michael Penix Jr., he will, if he finishes out his career, he'll be in for 6 years. Ali Patberg, she's in for 7. 7 years. That's nuts. But yeah, it's crazy. But the biggest impact now is, we'll talk about when we come back, is COVID, is how that's going to impact things. I know we're talking about recruiting, but man, COVID is going nuts. But the recruiting aspect, nothing else I expect to change anytime soon. No commitments are expected in the impending anytime soon, I assume, right, Alec?
Yep. No, the recruiting's kind of slowed down. You'll see some visits start to probably tick up maybe in January when a lot of these kids are off of school for the holiday break, when they can actually get to different campuses. But for the most part, you're going to see some of these recruitments kind of slowly die down until coaches can kind of get back out on the road and see prospects here after the holiday break.
Jason asking about turnovers. TJ, he made 7 in the Syracuse game. So there's that. But hey, we got more coming up here on Indiana Sports Beat. We're back with it as Dylan Sinn joins us. Alec Lasley from thehoosier.com. Thanks a lot. Appreciate you very much. Make sure you go to Indiana Rivals and get complete coverage of the Indiana Hoosiers there. We're back with more Indiana Sports Beat Radio right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington and Southern Stone Restaurant.
If you're in the market.
All right. Have a good one, guys.
See you, Alec. Thanks for coming on.
I'll talk to you tomorrow. Man, normally he's got a race. That's awesome.
I know, that was surprising.
I need one more cup of coffee.
If I drink any more coffee, I will set a record. I'm not even going to say what I was about to say, so never mind.
Where are you going this weekend, Dylan?
I'm going to both Crossroads games.
That's right. You cover literally every team there, I'm assuming, except Butler.
Yeah, pretty much.
Do you have someone on your beat not your beat, but at your paper that covers Butler?
Not really. No, it was something that when we used to write about them, apparently no one really cared that much, so we kind of dropped it a while ago, I think.
You know what?
Man, can't really hear what he's saying.
There's a reason for that.
Oh, I feel like 95% of Butler fans live in Indianapolis, and that's it. Here's our good friend, Zach Osterman. Morning, sir.
Hey.
Morning, Zach.
I'm forgive my droopy eye and raspy voice. I've got a chest cold and a scratch on my cornea. So
oh man.
Yeah, it's been a week. Chest cold courtesy of my son, scratch courtesy of my Christmas tree. So,
oh my God.
Is it a real tree?
Yeah, and I was like bending down to unplug it and just went in there. So
man.
Yeah. I'm okay now. I hope the lighting's good behind me. I'm still a little bit light sensitive, so I'm trying to leave
you're good.
The overhead light off.
Jim, we're back in 30. I'm going to bring us back from commercial.
Moore has over 2 decades of experience, and that could be the difference in you getting the home you want in today's tough housing market. Reach out to Cheryl Sizemore from Remax Advanced Realty at Cheryl@IndyHomePros.com or 317-298-0961. Cheryl Sizemore from Remax Advanced Realty. Let Cheryl Sizemore get you in the home you want today. Cheryl@IndyHomePros.com. Today's guest is brought to you by Reynolds Family Dentistry of Sellersburg. You need $1 million smile for those championship photos, and that's exactly what you'll get with Reynolds Family Dentistry.
Now back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington and Southern Stone Restaurant.
Welcome back. It is Friday. Indiana Sports Beat Radio. Hopefully getting your weekend started off right. Zach Osterman from the Indy Star joins us now. Zach, I'd ask you how you are, but I know it's been a rough couple of days. So.
I'm coming on the other side of it. The chest cold is one of those where I'm a little like I'm sort of surprised it's not COVID, but my son gave it to me. He tested negative. I tested negative. Sticking myself in the eye with a Christmas tree is just, I don't think I can blame that on a global pandemic. So,
speaking of which, COVID making a big comeback here of late. We've seen a ton of games canceled here as that continues to happen right now throughout the day. We just keep seeing games that are being canceled this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is a little bit kind of down to this most recent variant, and obviously we always have to be careful about what we don't know and things like that. You know, I saw something this morning talking about how in the province in South Africa where this was kind of first identified, I don't think they thought it originated there, but that was where they first kind of spotted this new variant. And, you know, cases went up really, really sharply, and now they're coming down really, really sharply. And it's sort of the point that this person was making, I think it was Scott Gottlieb, who I think has become kind of one of the leading voices in all this, was it neither of those make an enormous amount of sense unless it's doing something that we don't quite recognize or understand yet. But as ever, I think, you know, not to turn this into an 80s public service announcement, but as ever, you know, if you're vaccinated, if you're boosted, they say you're largely protected. Now, I have a couple of friends who are vaccinated and boosted and have tested positive recently, and they said it feels basically like what I have, which is a chest cold. But like I said, I have not tested positive, so I'm just one of the lucky ones, I guess, that's got something else.
Well, hopefully that continues, that everything stays negative for everyone, and as many games as continue. Indiana this weekend taking part in the last installment of the Crossroads Classic against Notre Dame. They've already announced a replacement for that, and a replacement that I think a lot of people are happy to see, a home-and-home series with Kansas. But they will take on Notre Dame this weekend. Notre Dame coming off of a big win over Kentucky. So they're going to be fired up because they would love nothing more than to wrap this series up with a win over Indiana after beating Kentucky.
Yeah, I mean, you know, in some ways you almost feel like Notre Dame beating Kentucky was good for Indiana. You know, it gets your attention if you're Indiana that Notre Dame beat Kentucky. On the other hand, I looked at that game. I mean, Notre Dame is one of the worst teams in the country in opponent 3-point percentage, and Kentucky was 2 of 19 from behind the arc in that game. So, you know, I'm not saying Notre Dame didn't earn its win, but it does feel a little bit like one that kind of went against the grain of expectation, you know, based on what both of those teams you would have expected them to do going into the game. Kentucky's not a great 3-point shooting team, but literally if they just shot 25% from behind the 3-point line, you know, they would have won the game. So it's good for Indiana, I think, in the sense that it gets their attention. And you're not taking Notre Dame lightly. But on the other hand, you know, at least of what we know of Notre Dame so far, and again, these are the sorts of things where, like, we say this now, then Notre Dame beats Indiana, and we say, boy, that's not a great loss for Indiana. And then Notre Dame, you know, it turns out they've turned some weird corner and they go on, you know, and finish third in the ACC. And then we look back and we say, well, that was an acceptable loss for Indiana. You never want to draw too many conclusions, but, you know, from where we are right now, from what we have right now, if you're looking at Notre Dame, you know, I think you can, I mean, they lost to Texas A&M. You know, they lost ugly to Boston College. They lost by 16. I think they were down by 20 plus at one point in that game. So the Kentucky win gets your attention if you're IU, but also maybe feels a little bit like an outlier if you're, you know, kind of trying to figure out the matchups in a game that I think Indiana should be favored in.
Dylan?
Yeah. That was what I was going to say, is that as someone who like has a passing understanding of where Notre Dame sits in terms of their basketball program, before that Kentucky win, it seemed like Mike Brey was like on a fairly hot seat, and he still is on there. So it does seem like a lot of Notre Dame people think it was an outlier. I guess the question for me is, how does Indiana rebound against this team because they have two guys who are 6'10" that can get on the boards, and they have some pretty big guards that I think are going to make things difficult for Indiana. So do you think that is a matchup that Indiana can hold its own in, or do you think that's going to be an issue?
I mean, I think it's, again, if you look at the wider statistics, Notre Dame is a decent rebounding team. They're very good at keeping teams off the offensive glass. I don't think that's necessarily something that's – I mean, Indiana has actually quietly gotten good in that area, and that's not just – that's not just against bad teams. I mean, they had 14 offensive rebounds against Syracuse. They had I think they had 8 against Nebraska, which is a decent number. That Indiana has quietly – they had 14 at Wisconsin. Wisconsin's not usually a team that struggles to keep opponents off the offensive glass. Notre Dame statistically does keep opponents off the offensive glass. I don't think that Indiana needs those extra rebounds to win games, maybe to win this game. I think what probably that does for Indiana more than anything else is balance out the turnovers. The possessions you're wasting with some of your carelessness in turning the ball over, you're making up for on the back end a little bit with some extra offensive possessions off rebounds. But my point is, I don't think it's central to Indiana's offensive identity. I don't think Notre Dame is elite at it. It's hard for me to kind of make sense of exactly what Notre Dame is. I covered Mike Bray teams for a year or two early in my career. They're usually a lot more offensively efficient than this. I mean, this is a Notre Dame team that scored more than 72 points once in a game, and that was against Chaminade. If you look at some of Bray's best teams, and even frankly, maybe not even some of his best teams, but just most of his teams are really, really good offensively. Now, this one's posting some good team-wide offensive or efficiency numbers.
I was going to say, they're still like 24th in the Ken Palms, aren't they?
Yeah, so they're efficient, but they're not high scoring. And when they've come up against basically anybody that can go toe-to-toe with them offensively, they've lost. Again, Kentucky being the one exception, and that's a game where you would have expected Kentucky to shoot a lot better than 2 of 19 from 3. They didn't. Literally all it would have taken was Kentucky making 2 of those threes, and they win the game, at least, in terms of, just mathematically speaking. So it's kind of hard for me to know quite what to make of Notre Dame, other than I think there are some things you can probably draw. It's a fairly short bench. Mike Bray always has fairly short benches. It's one where, you're going to have a couple guys that can hurt you from 3-point range. And, we'll see about whether or not Indiana can kind of has trouble with their size. I don't know that Notre Dame is built to rebound at an elite level. And I don't know that while Indiana actually quietly has been rebounding well, I don't know that it's like central to their offensive needs, so to speak, any more than, again, I think what it does for them, maybe at both ends of the floor, is compensate for the turnover issues, which is really Indiana's great weakness right now.
How important is this one? This is not a high-profile game, but it's after losing to Syracuse and losing to Wisconsin with the 22-point lead, the importance of winning this game for a lot of different reasons, whether it's mental, whether it's for the optics for other people. How important is it for Indiana to win last installment of the Crossroads Classic? You can throw a lot of stuff in there. How important is it for Indiana to win this game?
I mean, I think they just need it from an NCAA tournament perspective as much as anything else. I just think, Notre Dame probably, at this point, certainly is not tracking toward the NCAA tournament, but history tells us that Mike Bray's a good enough coach, and the ACC is a deep enough league that they'll get enough wins to generally stay afloat in terms of what the win looks like on your tournament resume. It's all right that you didn't beat Syracuse, and Wisconsin is its own thing because it's in conference play. But this team needs, number one, to start getting a feel for winning away from Assembly Hall. And I think we all know that, Saturday's game is bound to feel a lot like a home game in Indianapolis. It always does in this event. But still, I think this team intangibly needs to start feeling what it's like to win in a foreign locker room, a foreign shooting environment, a different floor, a different, just everything. And then from just a resume perspective, Indiana knew it was only really going to have 3 big resume building opportunities here in the non-conference. It took care of St. John's at home. It lost close to Syracuse on the road. And again, there's not a lot of shame in that. Obviously, they I think they'd be a lot better off if they won it, but still, you lose in double overtime on the road at Syracuse. You should still be able to sleep at night with that. But you got to win this one. You had to go into this non-conference stretch thinking, A, we can't drop a game we shouldn't lose. And so far, they haven't even really come close other than maybe the Eastern Michigan game. And B, we got to get 2 or 3 of these games that are resume builders. And that's where I think this just kind of is. I think they've just got to have it from a resume perspective, because this is a game you don't have to go chasing in conference play. This is a game that you don't have to sort of think like, well, geez, we'd better win at Iowa on January 13th, or we better find a way to go win at Maryland on January 29th because we didn't get Notre Dame. And you don't want to be into January and February thinking that way. You just don't want to be going into the last couple months of the season actually having to think in concrete terms. We need this game. We need this game. We need to do this and this and this. If you're Indiana, you win this game and there's an open road to being 12-2 when you host Ohio State on January 6th. And then you can really start talking about building momentum into the business end of the season. But I think that, I think they need to get this win to feel that way.
Changing gears a little bit. Of course, the National Signing Day for college football began a couple of days ago, and Indiana, the best class that they've ever had, a top 20 class. That's never happened before. Coming off of the season they had, shocking to say the least. They kept virtually all of their commitments -1. I was a little surprised to see Reese Taylor in the portal late yesterday, but a lot going on. Most of it positive for Indiana football.
Yeah, I mean, I think keeping this class together was always the biggest thing, and you always kind of rush to say, remember that a lot of these guys, you're not going to see them right away. And the ones you do, you're probably going to see a lot of them in more, sort of targeted roles and things. I do think the one thing that's interesting is I don't think this is the case with every player. I doubt it's the case, for example, with Reese Taylor, but you did sort of get the sense from listening to Tom Allen talk about the portal and his own sort of roster churn on Wednesday that, some of these guys that have hit the portal from Indiana in the last couple weeks, 3 weeks, have not necessarily been guys that the program wanted to keep. It have been guys where somebody basically said, we've appreciated your contributions to Indiana football. You got your 4 years, but we're going to move in another direction. And that, some people find that unpalatable. And I don't like when programs run guys off. I do think if you give a guy 4 years and he gets his degree at some level, that I think you have kind of fulfilled, your promise to him in terms of when you walked into his living room and recruited him and whatever else out of high school. And with the COVID year, it's always just going to be tricky. Like with the COVID year, it's always going to be difficult because you can't keep every single one of these guys around for 6 seasons. But I also think, and I wouldn't level this accusation at any one player specifically. I wondered over about the last month of the season if Indiana was guilty of feeling just a little bit satisfied as a team. Just because ultimately, a lot of these guys should have been allowed to feel like they had accomplished what they came to Indiana to accomplish. They came to Indiana to go to the Outback Bowl, the Gator Bowl. They came to, if you told, any of these guys, hey, you're going to sign, here in 2018 and in 2021, I'm not going to tell you anything about COVID because that's impossible to explain, but you're going to beat Penn State, Michigan, and Wisconsin all in the same season, and you're going to go to the Outback Bowl. They're probably going to think, well, yeah, then that's mission accomplished. That's what I envisioned. That's what I dreamed when I bought into Indiana over somebody else. I just wonder if there's maybe not also a little bit of value in turning over kind of ambitions and turning to younger guys. Obviously, some of the guys in this class, I'm also thinking about a guy like a Donovan McCulley or somebody like that who's going to come in and say, actually, I've set the bar a little bit further down the road. I've already seen them do that. Now I want to do something even better. I want to do something even bigger. I just wonder if this class doesn't allow for a sort of turning of the page for Indiana to just close the book on this period in time. And, whether they are, whether they're graduated like a Ty Freifogel, whether they've transferred like a Michael Penix, or whether they're headed to the NFL like a Micah McFadden. A lot of the guys, not all, but a lot of the guys that sort of formed, the core, the spine of these teams that have had success in 2019 and 2020, now they've moved on. Now it's time to refresh with a new generation. And that doesn't guarantee you're going to have success. It doesn't. I mean, college, there's countless examples in college football of basically just kind of programs catching lightning in a bottle for a little bit and then losing it and it never really coming back. But on the other hand, you can't keep these guys forever. At some point you're going to have to move on. And I just wonder if there's some value for Indiana in, that being now when you are bringing in a really good class. And I think you're always a little bit 50-50 on some transfers, but I think there's a handful of guys in this transfer class they're getting to that I think are going to make a really quick impact at Bloomington.
Absolutely. Some special guys in special places, and we'll look forward to it. And I look forward to seeing you tomorrow, man. I hope you get feeling better.
Thank you, sir. I'm sure I'll be there. I'm sure I'll be there by then.
Well, we'll appreciate you. Get feeling better, man. The great Zach Osterman from Indy Star. Be a subscriber. I am. We appreciate you, brother, as always.
Thanks, guys. It's good to see you. Have a great Friday.
Appreciate it. Zach Osterman joining us from Indy Star. Hey, we're back with Jeffrey the Greek. You want to talk about we're going to put a bow on this college football signing period. Back with more right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington and Southern Stone Restaurant.
Whether it's a celebration or I've already been thinking this right there. Reese Taylor to Purdue. I'm already thinking that.
I mean, yeah, they have a little bit of a need at corner. I would not be surprised. I think Reese Taylor is the type of player that could even play some offense for Jeff Brom. I think
I was getting ready to say, I bet he gets the opportunity possibly to play both sides.
Yeah, because Brom is the type of guy that, like, when he sees a player like Reese Taylor, his mind starts going a million miles an hour. It's like, how can I use this guy in
a multitude of ways?
Yeah. So that would surprise me.
They're going to have, what, is it 2 or 3 IU transfers?
Well, they had DeMarge Lewis and Samson James, and that would be Reese Taylor would be the third. Yeah.
Good morning, Mr. Greek. How are we doing, guys?
Traders.
Hey, Mr. Greek was his father.
Dylan, you're a multitasker. I followed you on Twitter and you followed me back right when you were still on. I'm impressed.
Oh yeah, I was. It was literally as we were coming off. Jim was doing his sign off, so I went over to Twitter to see what was going on, and I saw you followed me. So
nice.
You know,
I don't know why I wasn't following you before. My bad.
No worries.
Well, he saw that blue check mark, Dylan, and he's like, "Man, I gotta follow him now. He's verified."
Oh yeah, Jeffrey, I got the verified check yesterday. So
wow, no kidding.
It's a very exciting time, and now I can tell Jim is very jealous because he doesn't have his yet.
I don't know. Okay, the Journal Gazette. Okay, yeah. I don't use my real name, so I'm assuming that probably knocks me out of being verified.
We've been trying. The Journal Gazette has been trying to get itself and our journalists verified for quite a long time here, and it's not gone well until now. So
see, that makes
okay.
But see, that makes no sense. That should be automatic.
You think
I think so too.
But yeah, it's we finally got through to someone at, I think it was the Hoosier State Press Association or something like that. We had one of our social media guy, our social media editor was on this for like months. Like he sent out the most triumphant email imaginable yesterday. It was great. It was his moon landing.
Tom Brew doing his podcast from his hotel room.
That's great.
How about a brand new 2021 Honda Passport? Also 0% APR financing over 48 months and $0 down. Get more to your door with AndyMooreHonda.com.
Come see us at the all-new Andy Moore Honda, now in Bloomington.
This segment is brought to you by Remax Advanced Realty, Indy Home Pros team by Cheryl Sizemore. Now back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington and Southern Stone Restaurant.
Welcome back, Indiana Sports Beat Radio on this Friday. Jeffrey the Greek joins us now. How are you, sir?
I'm great, guys. How are you?
Cannot complain. You're here. What else could I ask for?
Wow, you need to raise your expectations a little bit is what I'm thinking, Jim.
Well, I'm trying to go into this weekend with low expectations and just see what happens. Right.
So do we have good-natured Jim or do we have crusty Croyle here on Friday?
I think it's good-natured so far. Nothing else, nothing to get my dander up yet. But we can always change that, baby.
For the record, I thought Krusty Croyle was very entertaining.
Oh, it can be. You can't just bring him out of the box all the time, though.
No, and that's a play on words. With I know you guys are friends with Dustin Schutte. And when Schutte gets fired up, we call him Spicy Schutte. So Spicy Schutte and Krusty Croyle, they're two good people.
Yeah, man, he's a good one. He's on yesterday. I wish that would be funny to have this. That would be a threesome of epic proportions.
If we ever get that done, it needs to be recorded inside a drinking establishment would be the best way to do that, I think.
You know what? Next year for the college football signing day.
That's not a bad idea.
Yeah. I mean, Big Ten in review, man. This would have been a good year to do it, let me tell you, because speaking of Mr. West, Mr. Big Ten West, I have a bone to pick with you.
Here we go.
You all are sucking butt in the recruiting. Every Big Ten East team is just
incorrect,
top, man. Minus Iowa. Iowa.
Yeah, there you go. Hey, I just worry about
minus
one
Iowa.
I can only control one program.
I get that, but here we go again. We've had this discussion before, and now it's like, okay, guys, how long is the Big Ten going to go along with its head in the sand?
So this is where we're going. We're going to start this out. All right.
This is where we're going, baby.
Jim woke up and chose violence today, so let's do it. I'm fine with it. So I mean, first of all, anybody that's overreacting to the recruiting rankings, it's kind of sounds like my 6-year-old. When like you take something away from them, it's just something. It's only for like a short period of time, but the overreaction to it is immense. That's kind of what it was yesterday. Or 2 days ago, when for a while the East had all 7 teams, the top 7 teams were all East teams. This has happened probably once in the last, 15 years that it's happened. So I think we're overreacting to one thing. I mean, first of all,
how many times has the West won the Big Ten championship?
All right, so you want to go recruiting Big Ten West versus East, or do you want to go the game? You can't switch up on me here. Which one do you want?
One leads to the other, my friend. One leads to the other.
So let me say this: as far as the recruiting, if we do the recruiting like we're doing it now, for the next 100 years, Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State are always going to be 1, 2, and 3. That's never going to change. It never has changed. It's never been a big deal in the past. The difference is you see Mel Tucker taking a much different approach to recruiting than the previous regime. Obviously Michigan State was always kind of right around Wisconsin and Iowa, maybe even Minnesota for the recruiting rankings. And then typically we have seen Nebraska up into the top 20 for recruiting rankings. They were usually the 4th or 5th Big Ten team. But we've got all kinds of interesting things that are happening right now. Namely, Nebraska is obviously in a weird, funky situation where they basically have, for lack of a better term, dead man walking at coach. So it's very hard to recruit in. So that was something that drug Nebraska down to historically low recruiting numbers that we're looking at now. And then you got Mel Tucker, who's the new hotness, the new hot girl in class. So that was always a bump in recruiting, and he's doing a good job of capitalizing on it. That's not any kind of negative comment towards that. And Iowa made a late push, on the last day. Phil Parker, I had a chance to talk to him about this for just a hot minute last year. They like to hold on to their recruits until the last minute because they get tired of other teams poaching them once they recruit guys. So they flipped 3 guys that morning, all defensive backs. And then the late signing of Xavier Wampa, who's a 5-star in some websites. So all of these things kind of happened, this year. I think it's something that's more finite to this year, but, don't stop people from using it and as something to talk about for the East versus West. So I guess I don't 100% blame people for jumping all over it either.
Well, Rutgers, how about Rutgers being up there? Rutgers is in front of every other West team except for Iowa, I think.
Yep. I mean, I'll put money, I'll put money on it right now that over the next 5 years, Rutgers will not finish above Nebraska, Iowa, Wisconsin. I would even put Minnesota in there. But again, Schiano is doing work, man. I mean, but there's going to have to be wins that are going to follow it pretty soon. And I just like to say right now, I mean, I'll throw it out there, but who would you rather have? The recruiting class that Lasley can bring in at Maryland, but then gets coached by Lasley's staff, or the talent that Minnesota and Wisconsin bring in, but then get coached by the Minnesota and Wisconsin staffs? I mean, what would you rather have? Because I saw a lot of examples of the Big Ten West beating the heck out of Maryland this year, and then Illinois should have got them. Recruiting rankings are extremely important. We put a little too much emphasis on classes. I'm going to say 10 to 30, okay? Because if you're in the top echelon, right, the top level to get the 5-star and 4-stars, there's no denying that those classes lead to higher talent, and typically those teams, get to the college football playoff. Once you get past 10, I would even maybe say 8 or 9, the difference between a class ranked 10th and a class ranked 26th is so small. Like, it's so minute, the difference between those classes. It really comes down to coaching and scheme after that.
One thing I wondered about is that talking about Nebraska and how much they struggled because it seemed like Frost is not long for that job. I figured that was part of the reason that they went and basically said he's coming back next year as early as they did, in the hopes of salvaging this class. And it seems like it didn't work. So I'm wondering whether that changes the calculus at all for them going forward.
I mean, it's a great point. I think if Trev Alberts, the AD at Nebraska, if you asked him, he probably put, the old-fashioned, Excel spreadsheet together, pluses and minuses of bringing Scott Frost back or letting him go. That would be on the plus side, is to try to maintain recruiting. But I think there were so many factors in play. Namely, I think he knew how crazy the offseason was going to be for the coaching carousel. And let's be honest, Nebraska right now is not at the top of the list for some of these hot coaching candidates, both head coach and coordinators. Like that secondary market for the coordinators is just as competitive, if not more. So I think Trev Alberts is a smart dude and understood that they were going to be one arm time behind their back in the fight. So that was the reason they kept Frost around. And then, they have been close. I know probably Nebraska fans are as tired of hearing that as anybody, but they have been close. So maybe now is not the time to move away.
They're going to have to hit the transfer portal hard. I wonder if they'll try to go basically the Michigan State route from last year and try to build almost exclusively through the transfer portal this offseason.
That's another great point, because a lot of times you can get a senior, sometimes a super senior that's only got a year left anyways. So even if it doesn't work out from that senior's point of view, no skin off their back. So I think that's a good point. Quarterback would be my guess for their number one need, because Mark Whipple over from Pittsburgh. I mean, that's a completely different style of offense that Scott Frost in Nebraska is moving to. It's a more, vertical downfield offense where you need, you're going to take shots on the outside to test the defense out there. You saw that with Pittsburgh this year. I'm not saying they don't have that quarterback. I think maybe they can, but he's very young. Harburg, he's like the third string quarterback. So my guess is that would be the position they look at, and the one that I've where there seems to be the most smoke and fire is Keaton Slovis from Southern Cal. That's not anything official right now, but that's one to keep an eye on.
How about this alignment? I like this. Michael Kolak's tried a north-south alignment with Minnesota, Wisconsin, Northwestern, Michigan State, Michigan, Iowa, and Rutgers. And the South would be Indiana, Purdue, Illinois, Ohio State, Nebraska, Maryland, and Penn State.
No offense to whoever wrote that, but that's junk. That's never going to work for me.
Why?
I'm pretty passionate about this. Like, okay, we are the Big Ten. We are the Big Ten. All right. This is the premier conference in the country. The SEC is the SEC. I understand that, but when you're talking current powers with traditional powers, like going back to World War I and II, the Big Ten is the Big Ten. All right. We are not playing Ohio State and Michigan 2 weeks in a row. That is disgusting. That makes me.
You have to play them 2 weeks in a row.
Yes, you do. If you do, that makes my college football soul want to lurch and puke when I hear that. Okay, Ohio State and Michigan are. If there's only two ways to do it, you go back to a round robin tournament where you completely eliminate divisions, but but don't play a Big Ten championship, okay, which we all know is not going to happen because the Big Ten is not going to give up that money, okay? The other way to do it, which is the more practical way, you do the divisions, but you keep Ohio State and Michigan in the same division, okay? You have to keep them in the same division. They play the last week of the season because that's how God intended it. And then they don't replay the next week. I mean, we've had the Big 12 play Oklahoma, Oklahoma State could replay, Oklahoma, Texas could replay in the Big 12 championship. That is disgusting, okay? And then second to that, I would put Michigan and Michigan State right there. I know they play earlier in the year, but winning those regular season games is supposed to mean something. You win that regular season game, that fan base has bragging rights for the whole year. Michigan won the Big Ten championship. They only lost one game. What was that one game? Michigan State. That ignites the fire for a whole year because Michigan says, we don't care. We won the Big Ten championship. And Michigan State says, ha, 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 that's great, but we beat your ass. Like that is what makes this sport great. You are going to strip the Big Ten Conference of that prestige if you start messing with these divisions too much. So I will not change my stance on this. It's ridiculous. Now, my idea is very simple. Send Penn State to the west and Purdue to the east. Now you've got Purdue and Indiana in the same division, so they play at the end of the year. You keep that the same. You have a balance of power. When we talked earlier about the top three teams in recruiting, always going to be Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State. Typically, lately, it's been Ohio State, Penn State, and then Michigan for the recruiting. So you would put the second or third, historically talented recruiting into the West and then move one that's, obviously historically low into the East. That is the closest we can get to the balance of power. Penn State has a little bit of rivalry with Ohio State and Michigan, but this is not like a generational rivalry that Penn State has with anybody. So that to me makes the most sense. I am sorry to get up on my box here, and I usually don't talk this long without interruption, but anyways, that's my thoughts on something I'm very passionate about.
It's great. We just have to take a break. Dylan Sinn was with me from the Fort Wayne Journal-Gazette, and Grouchy the Greek is here as well. We're back with more Indiana Sports Beat Radio right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club and Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington and Southern Stone Restaurants.
Whether it's a celebration.
What a freaking segment.
That one came just perfect, too. I was like sitting here, and I'm like, Grouchy the Greek. I'm like, perfect.
Well, when I see John pop up, I'm like, oh, he's gonna get mad at me. So I know.
No. It's just a signal of, hey, we're gonna take a break.
It's usually break time.
Yep.
Yeah, so I like your idea of Penn State switching with Purdue, but since Penn State is so much further east, you probably have to change the name of the divisions. How do you feel about going back to Leaders and Legends as a?
I think we all know how I feel about it. But I mean, that was the Big Ten trying to be intelligent with it, to be like, okay, we can't make it East, West, North, South, so let's give it names. And it was obviously a disaster. But like the other thing too is like, to me, well, the next part I'd like to bring up, if you guys are okay talking about in the next segment, is
anything.
The only fan base that should want the divisions to go away is Ohio State, because they are virtually locked into the Big Ten championship every single year if we go away from divisions. Virtually locked. Like
Michigan, think about it. They got jumped over Iowa, even though Iowa was the technical Big Ten runner-up for the Rose Bowl.
Correct. So, and Michigan fans that are, after they win the Big Ten championship, it's so typical Michigan fans, right? But them clamoring that they didn't want Iowa, that they wanted, like it should be, no divisions. Are you guys stupid? You just finally beat Ohio State for the first time since any of my kids are born. I got a kid in kindergarten, right? First time they beat them. Now you want to turn around and play them the next week in a dome on a rematch? Are you insane? Like if you are a Michigan fan asking for that, I've lost all respect for you. You're the dumbest person on the planet.
Yeah, look, I'm a Michigan fan myself, and I have no idea where that's. I saw a couple of people saying that. I have no idea where it's coming from. We beat them down. That's good enough. Move on, play Iowa. Like, I was honestly excited that we got to play Iowa instead of Wisconsin. I was worried about playing Wisconsin again.
Wisconsin defense more disruptive than Iowa, and if Braylon Allen was healthier, better off. I 100% like that's the point. And I'm shitting on my own squad here, but like after playing that emotional game for Michigan fans to then turn around to have to play, I mean, it's the best you could have hoped for.
Yeah.
All right, here we go.
Let's talk about that, John. I didn't know you were.
You can find it any place you podcast or on this station each weekday. If we're not on the station where you live, we should be. Ask for Indiana Sports Beat Radio.
This segment is brought to you by Aurora Specialty Sleep Clinic. Now back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington and Southern Stone Restaurant.
Welcome back, Indiana Sports Beat Radio. On this Friday, Jeffrey the Greek, as well as Dylan Sinn from the Fort Wayne Journal-Gazette, talking about college football signing day. It's come and gone. A lot of the transfers have really changed this immensely. Does Indiana with a top 20 class, is that counting the transfers?
No, that's just recruits from the way.
Okay, I was going to say that's the way it should be. You can't tell because they're included in all the media information that's sent out. So I was wondering about that. But Indiana, the top 20 class, first in program history, coming off of a 2-10 season, to be able to keep all those guys blew my mind. They lost Josh Hoover, who I don't know if that was more about Indiana or more about Sonny Dykes in Texas Tech or Texas TCU. He had been recruiting him at SMU. Then he moves over to TCU, which is closer to home. His parents can watch him play games now. The OC for TCU is Garrett Riley. He's got a brother named Lincoln.
Yep. It's everybody knows everybody in the college football circle. If you get to talk to coaches off the record, it's pretty funny how much they know and they don't let in on. So, a lot of times they know stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, talking about Indiana, obviously a ton of that class was put together last year when they were having all kinds of success. So that, typically the success and, the results after that and therefore failures and the repercussions after that, it's usually about a year behind. With that being said, Tommy Allen being able to hold a really good class together like that is very commendable.
It sounds like from what we know, it sounds like Desan McCullough, Deland McCullough's son, who's the top recruit in Indiana football history. It sounds like he was a pretty big part of holding that class together, because obviously he wasn't going anywhere. He wants to play for his dad. And it seemed like a lot of the other recruits in the class kind of turned to him and said, look, are we doing this or not? And that's reading between the lines. It sounds like he was the one that kind of did a really good job of making sure that everyone stayed committed when things were going off the rails. For Indiana, it could have fallen apart pretty quickly.
Yeah, I feel like that's something that's kind of organically come about the last, 5, 6, 7 years or so, is a early signee, bigger name recruit. And now it's so easy for these kids to connect, social media or whatever. They get a text group put together and then they start texting and, keeping in contact with each other. Back when I was getting recruited, it was walk over to your mom and dad's phone and, use the rotary phone to dial your buddy and talk to him. Way easier now for these guys to connect with each other. So great job by him.
Yeah, and it's and the answer was yes, I would. Okay, thank you. There was no hats. There was no hats to put on. There was none of that stuff. It was just boom, boom, and that was it. What is it? I've already forgot. What was it you wanted to talk about?
Well, Dylan and I were talking in the during the break. Didn't know that he had Michigan ties, but back to the conference realignment thing. The odd thing is I've heard the most. I got invited into a Michigan chat room where there was a host and I was the guest, and there was people that gave us questions. So it was really good. I mean, those fans were awesome. It was before the Big Ten championship, but a lot of the topic leading up to that. Were you in the
center?
I was just off the center. But leading up to that, a lot of the conversation was, why are we playing Iowa? This sucks. We should be playing a better team. I understand how the score wound up, but the goal for Michigan is to win the Big Ten championship and then get into the college football playoffs. They were already guaranteed that no matter who they were playing in the Big Ten championship. As it turns out, playing a top 15 ranked Iowa team, but that wasn't as strong as you would hope Iowa would be going into the Big Ten championship. That is the perfect scenario for Michigan. That is exactly what they wanted. It is literally like you get your wife the perfect Christmas gift and she doesn't like the wrapping paper. It's like, I don't know what to tell you. This is the best we can get this for it, So for Michigan fans to talk about that, it is crazy to me. And then the other side part was like, there was literally Michigan fans saying, think of how many viewers we would get if we played Ohio State again and beat their butt again. And I'm like, okay, I'll give. Okay, first of all, the Big Ten championship, I think, was the third most viewed college football game of the entire year. So it wasn't like it was hurting for viewership. The other side of it, I don't know what to say. I'm going to try to say this as kindly as I can, but any Michigan fan that wants to turn around and play Ohio State a week after finally beating them in a dome setting, I can't understand that version of fandom. I think it's insane. Tweaks could happen, but for Ohio State and Michigan to replay a game like that is bananas.
Yeah, I mean, here's my thing with that is that once you beat Ohio State, the goal is to just win and get it in the playoff. Because then if you're itching for another good opponent, you're gonna get it in Georgia. I don't know what the utility would be of having to play Ohio State again. You are going to get some great opponents down the road. It is a very Michigan thing. Speaking as, again, a Michigan fan myself, it is a very Michigan thing to be like, well, wouldn't it be great if we had more viewership?
You just got here. This, no offense, Michigan. This is the first Big Ten championship you've made since the history of the Big Ten championship. Okay, so at least be appreciative that you got there. The other side of this too, if I'm looking at this from a Michigan fan's point of view, and Dylan, again, you tell me, but basically what Michigan needs to do moving forward, just assuming things stay the same with divisions and the Big Ten championship, basically what Michigan needs to do is be Michigan, number one, right? And then beat Ohio State. If you are Michigan, which probably is a 10-11 win season, but at the end of the year, you beat Ohio State, you're probably in the Big Ten championship 8 out of 10 times. And if you win the Big Ten championship game, you're probably in the college football championship 9 out of 10 times in that setting. The table is set up about as good as it can for Michigan. I would put Penn State in that same boat, and Michigan State. The team that would want divisions to go away the most, like anytime you change something, NIL, early signing period, they always try to get creative on ways to make things more balanced. What happens every time we make a change? It just favors the big boys that much more every single time. And if you went away from divisions, mark my words, the team that would benefit the most would be the Ohio State Buckeyes. I mark my words. So if you're an Ohio State Buckeye fan, yeah, I'd be clamoring for the divisions to go away.
Yeah, everything is always going to favor the rich get richer. And that's the same with NIL. Look at when Texas, and I know I've used this example 1,000 times this week, but it's just the perfect example. When they have an offer that every offensive lineman on scholarship is going to get $50,000, that is an inducement because you're offering that to people, unknown, unnamed, unoffered people. So that is an inducement. There's no NIL is supposed to be directly between a party and a second party. There can't be this blank space like we have an outer, what's it called? Gray matter or
dark matter.
Dark matter that makes up 95% of our universe, which is nuts. That's a whole nother deal. That just makes your mind blow up. But
who could have seen it coming when you started throwing gigantic sums of money at 17?
Oh, no. Oh, God, no.
Wow. Wow. Crazy. Yeah.
What a shock.
Yeah. I mean, Kurt and I, my podcast partner, Eyes on Big Podcast, we did a whole podcast this past summer when NIL kind of became official. I think we called it the Old Man Yelling at Cloud podcast because I'm sure that's what we sound like. But and it's tough because I'm a capitalist. Like I feel like these kids should have the ability to make this money. I also don't think it's crazy to put some sort of cap on it in some capacity. And I hope that's something that we organically work our way to. I don't pretend to understand exactly how that's going to work out. That would be wrapped around my prediction that we'll have a college football commissioner at some point.
See,
so
then you can't the cap thing that goes. Now you're getting into work and all that and what's legal, what's not legal. And the thing is, here's what's funny. All these people like, oh, these players ought to be getting paid. Oh, they're getting treated so badly. Oh my God, what happened to our college sports? It used to be so great and now it sucks. And let me tell you, you think it sucks now? It's going to get worse.
Get worse.
It's going to get worse. There's nobody policing anything now. The NCAA has just said, screw it. Do what you want to do.
Yeah. I mean, eventually eventually the Power Five is gonna break away in more capacity. I mean, I feel like it's just a matter of time until that happens. So I'm with you there. I mean, again, go back and listen to our podcast from the summer. We said the same stuff. Long story short is we understand that these kids they can make some money. Like I feel like they should have be able to take advantage of that. But to pretend that none of this is going on, that it's gotten shady, like if you push so hard to have this in the first place, you're null and void of being able to complain about what's happening now, because we saw it coming, and I'm not saying it's all bad. Like just on our last podcast, Kurt and I debated, about Quinn Ewers. I mean, he went to Columbus, he got that bag, and then goes back home to Texas and got another bag, and
now on that first bag though wasn't related to Ohio State. I don't think that was through where was that autograph guy from?
I don't know exactly the details of it, but I would bet a substantial bag that, however the deal was set up, was with an understanding that he would put on the scarlet and gray and go play.
Okay, and that brought up another question that I brought up earlier this week. All right, with all this and all these sums of money, how in the hell are these NFL providers not going to start demanding? And I would demand a contract with this player. Yep. That this agreement is good and only good if you are here. If you go anywhere else, this is done null and void.
Yeah. I'm sorry to keep saying this, but go back and listen to our podcast from the summer. We talked about that exact same thing. We said, what's it going to be like when, I think we used a local athlete, Tanner Morgan, the quarterback of the Minnesota Gophers, where he has an agreement to play for a dealership, a car dealership. That's always the easiest one to use, right? But he either transfers or he gets beat out. He gets beat out. And now you got a commercial with the backup quarterback. Like if he gets injured, that stuff happens. You wonder if that's where the contracts are at. And at that point, congratulations, 19, 20, 21-year-old. You have entered into the professional world. You should be treated as such. You can go overseas and fight at 18, not to get too deep. So if you're getting paid to play football at 18, I no longer feel bad about you getting booed on a Saturday when you drop your second pass in the game, because this is the world you're in now. You're getting an accelerated course of how things are in the no fun league right here in college. So that's all of this stuff is coming about right now.
No.
Dylan, what do you think?
I mean, I guess my question, the kind of overarching question I have, is Quinn Ewers actually that good?
Right.
Do we know how good this man is? Who
knows? Who knows?
Yeah. And that's part of my issue with recruiting. My podcast partner Kurt does a much better job of in-depth at recruiting. When I was at Iowa, I'm not going to name names for the bad, but I saw guys that were, the high 4-star recruits come in, and you heard about them and you saw them and you're like, that guy's not that great, And then my senior year, there was this little known 2-star defensive back that came in, kind of very close to where Jim's recording from. Never heard of him. First scrimmage, he is lighting people up. Well, who was that? That was Bob Sanders from the state of Indiana. Nobody knew who this guy was. Everybody knew who that guy was by the end of the first scrimmage. I don't know. The stars are there. I get it. There's a lot of, but for me, I never will believe these guys are superstars until I see it.
Yeah, because you see a lot of them flame out or just not happen. But and sometimes the people that are doing that, it's like, okay, they look great on that particular day, or they look good on a particular day, and that's it. So there's just so many reasons. But there's and then how many stars in the NFL? I always say this all the time: NBA, NFL. How many stars in there are from schools that you never heard of necessarily, but definitely are not Power 5 schools?
We got one right now for and I'll just call it the quarterback free agency market for college. The number 1 quarterback is Ewers. The number 2 quarterback is an FCS guy that nobody heard of 3 years ago, right? And now he is the second hottest commodity. Actually, it's the hottest commodity now because yours is with Texas. So just another example of how, guys can slip through the cracks like that.
Absolutely, brother. What's coming up next for you, Dylan?
Yeah, I will be at the Crossroads Classic tomorrow for both games, Purdue Butler and Notre Dame Indiana. So it'll be a full day up there in Indianapolis for me.
And Grouchy, what's up next for you?
We're going to get right into the bowl games. I don't think the Big Ten plays their first bowl game until the 28th. So we'll on our podcast, Eyes on Big podcast, we'll break that down sometime right before Christmas before we get into the bowls. I'm old fashioned, man. I still love the bowls.
Oh, who doesn't? Oh, absolutely. It's a fun time, man. It was another fun day. Big thanks to Alec Lasley from the Hoosier.com, Indiana Rivals. Zach Osterman from the Indy Star, of course, Jeffrey the Greek from Eyes on Big podcast. Make sure you go check that out with Big Kurt, his counterpart, and of course Dylan Sinn from the Fort Wayne Journal Gazette. Big thanks to all you guys, as well as John the producer, but most importantly, thanks to you guys. Without you all, we'd have no reason to be here. I will be back tomorrow after the Indiana Notre Dame game for After the Game with Kirk Haston, former Indiana player. Kirk Haston will join me then. Thanks a lot, guys. I hope you have a great weekend. It was fun as always. Looking forward to doing this again next week. Until then, you guys have a great day, and I will see you on the radio.
That was a blast.